Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is Larry, and we are going to do contact report number 105 today. Okay, translated by the DeepL translator, and it was corrections and improvements made by Catherine Mossman, Joseph Darmanin. Contact person still is Quetzal. Okay, this took place on Wednesday, the 5th of April, 1978, at 0031 hours. In other words, about 12:30 at night. Okay, Billy, you're here pretty fast. It has only been barely a minute since you called me. Quetzal, I have been here a long time and have been busy with the lighting of your buildings. Billy, you mean the exterior lighting? Quetzal, yes, you should light up the environment better. Look here, in this place, here, there, and there, you should install more lights. Billy, aha! You laugh, but just a few days ago I told someone that there should be a lamp here on the hill. Here and here we also have one planned. But here at the parking lot we thought that the one that is already there would do. Quetzal, beside the doghouse you should put another one here. Billy, well, my son, it just costs us another great little thing. But tell me, you speak so strangely, just as if something is on your mind again. I am used to such things from you, that you explain them to me without them taking place at the beginning of our conversations, after which they are never included in the later reports. It seems to me that you have something special in store, something unpleasant. Quetzal, that is of correctness, but you should truly illuminate the surroundings of your buildings better. Billy, I have already understood that, Quetzal, but now finally tell me what lies on your stomach. Quetzal, it is very annoying, but what we feared has arrived. A corresponding letter is already underway to you. Billy, you are talking in riddles. I am really not following at the moment. Quetzal, we talked about it recently. It is very unfortunate that even today there is no relying on those Earth humans who prepared themselves in former times to fulfill a difficult task. Instead of making an effort to fully fulfill their commitment this time, many have become so entangled and trapped in the erupted and degenerated materialism that they are more psychologically damaged and worship it as an idol rather than honestly striving for their evolution. All advice breaks down uselessly and senselessly because their sense of responsibility no longer has the slightest value. Billy, I understand now, my son. You are talking about Claire. I felt from the last time she was here that she was going to jump off. I felt that because she was telling me untruths that caused quite bad swinging waves in her. Now I just wonder what's going to happen now, because her leaving is throwing the whole concept overboard. Quetzal, earlier I explained to you that you do not have to worry about that, because as a result of her previous evil fickleness, provision was made for her replacement. However, it will not be just one person who lived in close connection with your personality at that time, as another personality in former times, but three of them. This unfortunately makes things more extensive and more complicated for Elsie and for your cannibal, but not in such a manner that they cannot be understood and mastered. Billy, and when will Claire be leaving? Quetzal, she has already done that since the last time she was with you. She did not tell you the truth when she talked to you, as you just explained yourself. But now she finally found so much honesty that she told you this in writing, at least so much that she finally stepped aside. Unfortunately, she pities herself and truthfully does not try to find the truth in herself, if she lives not only in doubt but also in ideas of selfishness. Out of this selfishness, she also does not find the way of the truth, which is why her language is always pervaded by untruths or half truths. Billy, I know that, unfortunately, but I was unable to do anything to bring about a change in her senses. She just did not want it, and it is difficult for her to leave, but what cannot be changed cannot be changed. Damn it, poor Claire. Quetzal, your attitude is very typical for many Earth humans of today. But everything will still be fine, although now many things look very precarious. Claire's resignation means that certain things will have to be restarted. Hopefully, the other two will be able to hold out and do their duty, otherwise, everything will collapse. There is no substitute for them. Elsie, in particular, should be extremely careful in this respect because her emotional world is very often set in turmoil and blocked by things she misinterprets, which cause thoughts and impulses in her that can become dangerous for our whole task. And here's in this futureofmankind.co.uk, they have an open word for Billy, and this is by Adolf Tillman Perinaud. My person should probably not be of importance for the following words, because the only thing that is important about them is that they are said once, whereby I believe I am speaking in the interest of all honest members of the community of interest. When I say I believe, I do not, of course, mean a belief, but a certain assumption that this is indeed true. Somewhat unaccustomed to writing and awkward at it, I have to enlist the help of another person to make these words stylistically good, for which I hope you will forgive me. Since I also don't want to give a long preference, I would like to get straight to the subject, which I call an open word, for Billy. In another title, any other title would probably do, perhaps, a human being never to be forgotten, although I am not thinking of Billy's past lives, but only of his present one. In a nutshell, Billy is a human being like any other, and yet he is something very special. Over a long period of time, I have had the opportunity to get to know him, to observe him, and to notice various things about him that many acquaintances and friends of his seem to have missed. Certainly, Billy is a human being like any other, but I have already said that he is nevertheless something special, not only because of his unsurpassed knowledge. I certainly do not need to say anything about his spiritual and consciousness knowledge and ability, but a few words must be said about his manual knowledge and ability. When Billy says of himself that he has worked in and on some 320 different professions in his life, this may sound presumptuous and crazy, perhaps even megalomaniac, to the uninitiated and ignorant. But to us, who know Billy and have seen him work, it sounds neither like the one nor the other. We have seen for ourselves how he worked day and night like an elephant in restlessness and non-stop effort for weeks and months. The crazy thing was that he never seemed to be tired at all, because his verve was always unbroken. Sure, his physiognomy was marked by all the heavy exertion, but his strength seemed to find no end. Without exaggeration, he worked for an entire team, like a machine that never wanted to stop. In fact, a human robot, animated only by the will to achieve a programmed objective without regard for himself. Simply superhuman. I cannot describe it any other manner. Billy, a human being like any other, certainly, but still something special. A human being with an inhuman will that seems to be made of the best Sheffield steel. We have certainly all never seen or experienced anything like it, but in no way does it stop there. Billy not only works like a dinosaur, he also knows all kinds of things about his trade, although, as he says, he has never graduated from a vocational school. He learned everything only in a short time, often only in a few weeks, as Manara explained in the contact report on the 6th of July. In contrast, other human beings attend a 3-year vocational school. But Billy, he learned everything in short courses, in a few weeks or months, and yet he has mastered the subject. What has he not done in the last 3 months at the Semyazi Center? On how many trades has he proved his skills? Let us list a few. He did perfect bricklaying. Then he proved his skills in carpentry and plumbing. In between, I could see that he proved to the head forester that he is skilled in forestry. To Jacobus, a trained agronomist, he showed that he knows as much about agriculture as the latter does, but that he is also versed in the gardening profession, that he is also no stranger to architecture, interior design, construction planning, and landscaping, and that he has very good skills in all these areas. We also learned and experienced bit by bit, as well as that he can work expertly in civil engineering and glass masonry. He seems to have mastered road and car park construction, as well as painting and typing. Yes, and often in recent months I have wondered if there is any work at all that Billy cannot do. But more realistically, it is probably to ask, is there even a second human being in the world who understands and can do as much as Billy? All those who know him better know that Billy not only works like an elephant and replaces a whole crew, but that he would not need to do that at all because through his own consciousness, spiritual abilities, he could do everything for himself much more easily. But he does not make use of this, except when it might be too much for him. He thinks that he is placed in this world and has to live together with the human beings here, which is why he has no special privileges and therefore also has to work like everyone else, namely with his head and his hands. Well, for the ignorant, it should be said that Billy is also so well versed in psychology and psychiatry, as well as in theology, theosophy, and anthropology, and in general in all the borderline sciences and the humanities that several professors together probably cannot fool him in all these fields. But how could all this be otherwise, knowing that Billy is the prophet of the modern age, as the Patali Plain, Semyazi, and all the others declare? Myself and many others, we know that this is true, and that this one-armed man is something very special. Although he is a human being like everyone else, that had to be said once. Okay, so now I guess we're back to the contact reports. But such things do not appear with her, but already with all those group members who lose themselves in childlike forms of thinking and interpret certain occurrences unwisely and unjustifiably to their disadvantage. I think this is Quetzal talking. Once before, I explained that there are many indications that your group is a children's playground, and it is precisely this impression that is currently becoming very strong again. Adult humans, even if they are misguided Earth humans, should be more reasonable and conscientious, especially if they belong to your group and have taken on certain obligations. If these concerns do not change very quickly, then everything will break apart and all efforts so far have been in vain. It should finally be understood that our explanations were not simply taken from the air when we explained that there are 7 very difficult years ahead for your group, which each member of the group must strive to cope with. But this is only followed in a few cases where everything always becomes worse instead of improving. All of our and your efforts will be useless and everything will break for all time unless all members of the group finally accept reason and think and act correctly. But if a disintegration takes place, then we see no more possibility to ever try for everything another time. If now, the present time will become extremely difficult for all of you, rationality should finally prevail and take hold in every individual. In the present form of group solidarity, everything is in danger of being destroyed. And if every member of the group does not finally trouble themselves in a very quick and full measure to act according to our instructions, to adopt reason, and to be compliant on their own accord, uncompromising and without selfishness, then the existence of the whole group will only yet be given a regrettably very short period of time. The members of the group take all concerns too lightly, and their efforts are not evolution-based, because they do not want to separate from the worldly and material realm of life in the form required. Billy, these are beautiful prospects. What am I supposed to do? Quetzal, you did what you could. The rest is in the hands of the group members. Nobody should therefore blame you for differences and other bad things. Billy, you know for sure that a television, parentheses, a crew, in parentheses, was there at noon and that a documentary film is to be shot from America. What am I supposed to do now? Because if the whole place is as bad as you explained, then it would be very worrying if this TV show were made and also the film was shot, for which I might also have to go to South America. Quetzal, that is of correctness. I followed the events and discussed them with the others. We think that you should let things go as planned and that the two ventures will be very useful in every respect. There is a possibility that, despite everything in your world, things can be sorted out that we already had to write off on the basis of the misinformation from the so-called UFO groups. There is also the possibility that, in spite of everything, in distant time, intelligences from outside the Earth will be able to enter into official contact with the Earth humans, whereby, however, that will not be us, and thus also not our allies. You should therefore do what was brought to you, but you should be very careful not to travel with large flying apparatuses. This is an allusion to your aversion to such devices, but my advice is based on caution and safety. On the other hand, group members must finally learn to get along without you and fulfill their duty without your constant instructions. It is a foretaste for them when you finally leave their field of vision and their environment and have to leave them alone for a very, very long time. Billy, this is a day that worries me. But tell me, here are the dates of the group members you requested. Are they thus correct? Quetzal, ... Here, this is the data list of your cannibal. It is too incomplete. I will take them all and give them back to you this night, so I can go through the data in peace. Billy, well, then just put it in my office. Another question. We brought an article twice in our monthly magazine, which was sent to me anonymously. It had ... Quetzal, you asked me about it once, and I did not know the answer. Meanwhile, Minara explained to me that this paperwork was her handiwork, whereby she approached a person you knew little about to write everything. And this is parentheses, see contact report number 100, page 102, article something or other, German. Okay. Billy, that is exactly what I thought. Several people got really upset about these two articles. But who was the writer? Quetzal, it was not necessary to get upset about what was written because it was true. The writer of the article, however, wants to remain unrecognized, which is why during his lifetime you should not give the name, which I, therefore, give to you only in the trust of silence. ... The author of the two, in parentheses, the author of the two articles, Adolf Tillman Prinad, has since passed away. Billy, you know, they found that the article in issue number 18 was just as incorrect as the one in issue number 21. Harold also said that he did not say a word that my eyes should have looked into eternity. Besides, the number of people present was not correct either. Quetzal. First, the number of people present is correct because besides the group members, Minara and some of us were there. Secondly, Harold explained literally that your eyes had looked very far and somewhere into eternity, where I can also testify to, because I listened to the records of Minara. All the other things mentioned are also true, as I could see from the records and writing itself. Minara pushed three very important things with her actions, namely, on the one hand, to prove to the group members that they had not developed their power of observation in the form that would have been necessary for them. On the other hand, to prove that they paid very little attention to spoken or self-spoken words, after which no exact memory can later be present, which is why it should be learned to listen carefully to each word. And thirdly, Minara once wanted to draw the attention of the group members to the fact that they see you just as little in the truthful light, just as outsiders do not either. Minara is another ET. She's another player, and I don't think we've met her yet, but she's there. She's been here before. But anyway, sounds like she wrote a couple of articles, and she had this guy type them up and send them to Billy, send them to the group, put them in a group newsletter. Anyway, if, therefore, these and those have complained about what is written, they have thereby proven their inadequacy and incorrectness in relation to the concerns mentioned. Billy, your speech is good, Quetzal, but whether that is accepted is questionable. Quetzal, I mentioned earlier that reason should finally be learned. Billy, I can already hear that they will swear about you again. Quetzal, this is known to me, but only those who are not able to think very far in their irrationality prove it to me with the evil words. Billy, that is your thing. Something else. What about Amata? Should I pass the reports on to her? Quetzal, totally trivial ones, yes, but none of the ones which deal with important things. Billy, okay then. Quetzal, I have to interrupt you because my time is limited today and I still have some things to say to you. I have come across various group members in a thought analysis that I have been judged to be unfair because I usually follow the real path and expose those things in a teaching manner which are of a negative form. Allegedly, according to these incorrect trains of thought, I should disregard the positive thoughts and efforts. This corresponds neither to the correctness nor to the truth because truthfully I analyze both impulse forms, the negative ones as well as the positive ones. In order to avoid such misjudgments in the thought processes of the various group members in the future, I would like to explain that they should strive to think in more real terms and to become clear that to become clear that in order to improve and change a negative value, I must name and explain it. But this does not mean that I overlook the positive efforts. It is not appropriate and also not possible to mention positive aspects when clarifying faulty concerns, because thereby the negative would be trivialized, which is why the positive must be omitted as with a prophecy. Each of the group members should finally consider these things in a rational-based manner and find the true values out of them. But this can only happen when the inadequate earthly form of thinking of self-pity, self-prejudice, and the constant idea of discrimination against others is finally corrected. Excuse me. But now, to other and more important things that relate to you, such as the malicious attacks of the Bafaths, the Giza intelligences, and on you on the afternoon of the 30th of March. As I told you during our last confidential contact, I had to call in Ptah to clarify the matter completely. But Ptah is still working on these issues and has not yet achieved any results worth mentioning. It is only clear that the attack on you occurred when you caused your blockade to collapse as a result of a wave of anxiety. It was a psycho shock of unimaginable intensity imposed on you, according to the strength of which you should succumb to a heart attack. As I have already explained to you, it is not possible for me nor for Ptah to explain that you are still alive and only for a short time in absolute uncontrollability. According to all our calculations, you should be dead. It is also certain that I do not have to answer your questions at the last contact about the possibility that Bernadette and your wife might have been influenced by the Giza intelligences. Your cannibal clearly acted in full consciousness against your agreement, even if she later regretted them. It is not true, however, what you have imagined from their behavior, even if certain impulses were connected with it, which correspond to a rebellion in unjustified form. It is also certain that you no longer had any control over yourself and could no longer have a clue about what you were doing and saying, whereas this certainly does not apply to your wife in relation to your question about her words. With her, this was based only on a lack of self-control and on uncontrolled emotional outbursts. Despite her exuberant temperament, she should have kept her temper, because she had to realize clearly that you were no longer yourself in any form and that you were controlled from somewhere else. But for her, this does not mean a reproach, but a clarification from which she should recognize and correct her mistake, according to which an event of the same kind can no longer apply in the future. In order to be able to name further facts in this very regrettable context, I have to wait and see what Ptah's analysis shows, which he is still trying very hard to clarify. It is a fact that we cannot help you in any regard in such cases, which is why you will always be dependent on your strength alone. But this can mean that you leave life early and the task will be destroyed. It is therefore appropriate that you are not placed in the same or a similar situation by third parties some other time through unreason and unjustified rebellion. What is being done by our side is that we are considering the idea of removing the Bafath beings from the earthly system, getting hold of them, destroying their entire stations by a total elimination, or restoring them to their original state, and abandoning them, deprived of any technology whatsoever, somewhere in a strange and uninhabited region of the distant galaxy, where they can live out the rest of their lives built on evil. So they're talking about getting rid of the Giza intelligences, the Bafath bad guys that lived underneath, or one of their bases was underneath the temple of the Pyramid of Giza. Actually, the laying down lion in front of that pyramid, I guess. Anyway, I forget what the name of it is. Billy, man, Quetzal, that would be the hit of 1,000,000 years. But why do you now want to go behind these jerks by force? Quetzal, their dangerousness suddenly becomes much greater, which is why we have to resort to logical Gewalt, in parentheses. That's a form of power, in parentheses. In other words, to Gewaltsamen, in parentheses, powerful powerlessness. Billy, That is a word, my son. When is it supposed to happen? Quetzal. If the councils with the High Council coincide with our decisions, then the start of the enterprise will take place during the second half of this month. So they're going to grab the Giza intelligences, yank them out of there, and put them on some barren rock in some distant part of the galaxy without their technology and see if they survive. Let them live out the rest of their lives with no technology. Okay. And also, you got to remember that the B'Phath also came from the Plejaren long time ago. They're a splinter group that have been causing trouble ever since. Anyway, Billy, that is good because a little rest will not hurt us. Quetzal, you and the whole task are still very vulnerable to other elements, earthly as well as extraterrestrial, the latter being related to the B'Phaths, the Astar, Sharan, etc. Billy, I can imagine that, but these Sharan types, etc., are certainly not as mean and dangerous as the Giza twerps. Quetzal, do not let yourself be deceived, because the dangers are sometimes even greater, because these elements do not have to take into account that their existence becomes known. Billy, so this means that the anger continues despite everything. Quetzal, that is of correctness. Even your good year does not change that. But now it's time for me to go. Goodbye, my friend. Be careful, even very careful, because things that are quite uncomfortable and full of intrigues are clenched against you. For these reasons, we also have to restrict our contacts for the time being, because perhaps even till the end of the year. Billy, aha, and how about that? With some company and so on, if I possibly go to America, etc., because of the filming? Quetzal, you will have to rely on your own protection, because for various reasons we cannot use ourselves for it. Billy, so the usual, but that does not worry me. Quetzal, but different, very unpleasant events can come to light. Billy, I suspected that, but still you do not scare me. Quetzal, that is not my intent. But now, farewell and goodbye. But wait, still pay loving greetings to everyone from Semyazi, but also from Ptah and everyone else, including me. Explain also to your cannibal that she should allow herself more rest because she needs it very much. Also, let Elsie be very dearly greeted by me, even if here and there she has doubts about my form of acting. But she should be sure that my actions are of complete correctness. And she must become sure and clear that I do not live in your earthly world of thought, but continue to advance in a stage of development which the earth human must first strive for in the course of the next centuries, since he or she will only then learn to understand that my form of acting is of correctness. Now goodbye, my friend. Billy, take care, Quetzal, and best regards to everyone. So, that's it for Contact Report 105. And we'll get on to 106 when I get a chance. I'd like a little quick note about all the UFO files being released from the U.S. government. Most of those are recorders or telemeters or whatever. I don't see any real ships, at least not yet. And Semyazi has said in the past that most governments have very, very little real information. A lot of it's a smokescreen. And the government knows what's going on because Billy has sent them letters. They've been over to investigate Billy. All the governments, all the big governments, the Russians and the Chinese and the Japanese and the Americans have all investigated Billy right down to the last, and they know what's going on. They just don't want us knowing what's going on. So my advice would be all this stuff coming out, all these miraculous releases of, are we really alone, whatever, coming from the federal government, U.S. government, take it with a grain of salt because they're aware of what's going on, and I don't think they're going to show us what's going on. Just got to rely on these contact reports. Okay, that's it for 105. We'll catch you on 106. Again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.